and welcome back to another episode of the Cardboard Herald. I'm your host, Jack, and this is my chance to talk with creative gamers and game creators. And I'm joined today by Jonathan Weaver of Gameweaver Games. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Yeah, man. Well, Jonathan, you're kind of like an unlikely candidate to have on the show. You haven't officially published any games yet. Gameweaver doesn't have a Board Game Geek page. You don't even have a Kickstarter project like in the immediate future. But in some ways, that's kind of like the perfect story that I want to capture on the show. We talk with game creators and creative gamers, but I really haven't had an opportunity to talk with someone who's just making the leap from aspiring creator to someone who's actually executing on like publishing games. So first off, how long have you been working at Gameweaver or working on Gameweaver, and what kind of got you into this thing?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I love sharing this story. It is true. I feel like there is a leap in the midst of my life right now, and that I'm still in the middle of the air. I'm not sure where I'm going to land. So I definitely feel that aspect of, wow, I just left that cliff, and I guess I'm headed to this other cliff maybe. So Gameweaver feels like it's been around in me in some sense. I go kind of deep and philosophical right off the bat, but it's been a part of my life even when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. I made up games for my sisters a lot. I was this is a really funny story, and kind of shows the nerdy 90s and 2000s in my life, but I was a leader of the medieval guild, which was basically all of us outside using wooden sticks to play medieval battles.
How old were you?
I was about 10 years old till I was like 17.
And is this in Alabama?
This was in Louisiana and Colorado. I have grandparents in Alabama, so I did do it in Alabama as well whenever I would visit them, because they had big woods and wonderful, pine forests to be fighting in. In some ways, the organization of even a bunch of other teenagers and younger kids to have medieval battles and fight with sticks, I don't think any parent was super stoked about that, but my parents were consistently like, you guys hit each other for real, So
Please tell me that you were at least building like forts and establishments in the middle of the woods, scraping together whatever wood that you could find. There's got to be some awesome stories of that.
Oh, man. Yeah. Well, this is the thing. That's actually pretty common in Alabama because, what else are you going to do, right? So
right.
We would build TP forts and log cabin style forts before even medieval became a thing. But I went and visited a friend who was an old-time friend of mine, and he was playing medieval with his friends up in North Dakota, which was another place I used to live. And they had this big ravine, and they had statistics about who died when. They had the whole 9 yards. It was basically like, I think I was hearing about Greg Loring Albright doing pervasive gaming. Mm-hmm. It was like that, and so Gameweaver kind of has been a part of my life even when I was young.
What were these games that you were designing for your sisters?
Yeah, so for my sisters, I started designing games with like things around the house. So we had a Beanie Baby soccer league when Beanie Babies were.
All right, yeah, I dig it.
Yeah, so you've got like your Bears versus your, I don't even know, miscellaneous versus your Penguins. I don't know. We had all kinds of stuff, and we'd keep up with scores, and I'd have rules for how you could play it. I recently, Jackson Pope has been doing that Craft Wednesday thing, and I just was telling him how I had made an entire 68 card deck of Lego cards straight from scratch, just drawing with colored pencils and making up abilities. And I tried to play with my sister. Obviously it failed miserably because creating a TCG or a CCG is like immense game design, and I'm 12.
Yeah, and every 12-year-old who's played Magic or Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh! Or anything thinks it's the easiest thing in the world. They're like, oh, I got this, easy.
That's super true. That's super true. What's funny is mine was Star Trek. I inherited a bunch of Star Trek cards from a friend who got in trouble and actually had to give them away because he got in such bad trouble. I know. So I randomly run into these Star Trek cards, learn to play, and I'm like, this is amazing. And so then I just was like, I could do this, and I make the Lego cards. Anyway, so I've been making games as Gameweaver, quote unquote, without having any title whatsoever besides my own for a long time. I'm also called by my last name by most people that know me. And so it's that whole idea of like just being called Weaver all the time that makes it easy to have a name like Gameweaver, because I really felt the gaming or the tabletop or the board gaming world come into my life right out of college. So I had played Settlers of Catan in college at 1 or 2 points and thought it was kind of good. And like enjoyed the interaction there. I really got hooked on actually Lord of the Rings Risk before Catan, but it was only with my music minister at my church back in Louisiana. So I was once again in those teenage years, loved Lord of the Rings, loved medieval, and of course Lord of the Rings Risk is a perfect hybrid of that.
And it's the best copy of Risk out there.
That's exactly. I'm so glad someone agrees with me. Everyone's like, Risk Legacy. I'm like, no, Lord of the Rings Risk.
Yeah, forget Risk Legacy. I will tell that to Rob Daviau's face. I mean, Risk Legacy is cool, but come on. Lord of the Rings Risk actually has the sweet actual ring that comes with it, and you move it along the board and everything. Come on. I still have that copy like prominently on my shelf. That and the Lord of the Rings Monopoly. I don't care how much guff I get for it. Those will remain as part of my collection.
That's amazing. I love that, because I definitely feel the same way. And we decided to scrap the ring sometimes just because, we would wear it, obviously. But obviously. Like we weren't going to use it on the board just because we just had hours to spend on a Saturday. And it was about the time when Halo 2 and all that jazz is coming out. And I'm playing those too. But man, that Lord of the Rings Risk game just captivated me. And because of the strategy in there and all that. So anyway, I get done with college. So that was in my teen years in college. I played Catan a few times. After I get done with college, I moved to Birmingham. I'm about to get married, but I don't really have much of a community around me other than a few friends from college. And we just decided, hey, why don't we just start hosting a game night? Because I started realizing like games are just an easy way to get people to hang out together.
Yeah, totally.
And I didn't really do the bar scene, so like I didn't I went to concerts at some of the cool bars in Birmingham. But so anyway, I decided to, with my buddy, plan this game night, and it was insane. We started off with like 4 people. And over the course of time, we had this Halloween game night, like only 2 or 3 months after we started this thing. There was 30 people there dressed up.
What did you dress as?
I was actually the Mad Hatter, because my girlfriend, who then would become my fiance, was Alice.
Oh, okay, perfect. I'm imagining like Tom Petty from that one Alice in Wonderland music video that he did. I'm trying to think of what the song is. It gets to some freaky places, so I kind of don't want to think about it in the middle of talking to you now that I think about it. But yeah, so that's a pretty cool couple's costume there. So you guys have this Halloween party and 30 people show up. Were you all playing games? We played, I don't know if you've heard of this one, The Great Dalmoody. Oh, yeah.
It's like classic old card game. We played that one. We played, obviously, Charades and Mafia. We adapted Mafia. This is where the game design is still a part of my life, because me and my buddy realized, oh my gosh, we're having so many people come to this party. You can't play Mafia and everybody be a commoner. That's lame. No one likes that. And so we decided to create like the arsonist and the weatherman and like all these different roles that we just created on a whim. And of course some of them bomb terribly, but it's funny because there's 30 of us. Who's going to even play Mafia with 30 people? So anyway, we had a great time, had some really great laughs. And that game night, the cool part to me is that game night is still going in Birmingham to this day. And it's like every 2 weeks, and we've kind of passed the torch because I moved away. I'm in Rome, Georgia now, and my buddy is back in Birmingham, but he got married and moved all over the United States for a bit. And so we handed it to a friend of ours who also came through Auburn and is officially, like, I think he's a vet or he's something medical in Birmingham. And he still has about, he says a range of 7 to 15 people, sometimes people he doesn't know, that people bring to this game night every 2 weeks. And that's just really cool to me. I think, just to be able to start and be a part of something like that, that's also where modern board gaming came in, because I started to research, like, what games are good, what games are new. What
would you say is like a touchstone game, like a game that really inspired you, that was like, this is on a whole new level and something like what I would like to be creating, if not, that specific type of game, but just in the way that it made you feel, you wanted other people to feel that about your games?
Ooh, that's good. So I would say that like modern board gaming portal would have been Pandemic, the feeling of just being like against the game. And wow, that was just incredible to me, because that's what video games have been able to do forever. And so I loved Pandemic. I think for me as a designer, the games that have been the most impactful have been I guess I'm trying to think of the best touchstone for this. Probably for me, like the small world area control style games, like obviously Lord of the Rings, Risk, ones where there's that alliance element available. I've played. It's hard to like weed back through the more recent games that I've played back to the days when I played only like 6. I think those two. Smash Up was big. I really loved Smash Up. Just the feeling of being different.
Yeah, and it's so intuitive, like immediately intuitive. Like as soon as you shuffle 2 decks together, you're like, I see the potential in everything now, and you just want to try every single combination. And what's so funny is, I can relate to a lot of the things that you're talking about here, and like having these big parties and having people over and playing games, and that beginning of kind of diving into the modern hobby game scene and feeling like every game is the like biggest and most wonderful game, and you're like talking to people like, have you heard of this game Small World? It is the most complex, crazy, big in scope game I've ever seen. I actually did a review of Small World recently, a written review where that was like a feeling that I wanted to tap into when, I don't know, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, whenever I first played Small World, longer than that now that I think about it.
Probably.
Time is flying. As you know, being a parent, all of a sudden, like time zips by like crazy. But, when I first played it years ago, and I had a lot of experience with tabletop games, with a lot of Risk type stuff, and then especially CCGs. In high school, I was heavy into CCGs. And then I ended up moving to Juneau, where I live now. I played Catan and Carcassonne, and then boom, Small World comes along, and there's so many pieces and tokens and everything. I thought literally it was the most complicated and crazy game I had ever played. And little did I know that, like, now 2018 Jack is like Small World, that's easy level stuff. This is so simple and straightforward and not complicated. And I think that it really speaks to the elegance and how it's kind of like a stepping stone game that brings you into a more complicated realm outside of those other gateway games. But yeah, I have such affection for that period of discovery when you're first rapidly getting into games, and it feels like every experience is new and completely different than last, and you're no longer jaded going like, oh, this is pretty much like that other game, but a little bit different.
So true, man. I miss that age.
Yeah. Anyway, so when do you actually decide to make Gameweaver a thing and you want to publish games that you're making?
Yeah, that was so my first game idea. I work in college ministry. I moved from Birmingham to Rome. That was the big swap away from my gaming community, and now I have no community as I build it, because I had to build it. And I found myself in college ministry with half of a summer. We'd go to a project situation where I would oversee some students down at the beach for half of the summer, and then half of the summer is supposed to be available for support raising and things like that, being with family. And I really enjoyed that, but I'm such an active mind and I'm such an active person. I would get really bored. I don't do, I think I saw something the other day, I don't do casual leisure, I do serious leisure. Like I enjoy
I totally get
doing
that.
something mentally while I relax.
Mm-hmm.
And so decided to move into this idea of Gameweaver more because I designed my first game. Because I played, I think it was Archipelago. Yeah, I played Archipelago that summer with some people. And I just loved the semi-co-op aspect of it.
Uh-huh.
How frustrating it was.
Yeah.
Tense it was. I was like, has me on the edge of my seat every turn because these nincompoops could ruin it all. And like then at the same time, like they could also ruin me, and I had the chance to really ruin. Anyway, there was just this tension that I was like, plus the game felt like it could beat us. And so I really loved that. I was a history major in Auburn, and what I realized was that my interest in history, this is how my mind works, but it instantly created a time frame where that felt true. Mm-hmm. And it was the Crusades.
Right,
and
right.
the Crusades are like, oh, I'm going to go for this quote unquote valiant reason. But really, I'm going to go because of my own fame and my own country and become back a hero.
Yep.
And so I felt this like, if every player was France and Holy Roman Empire and Britain, or in that time, Normandy and all that jazz, if each player had a different zone or area of Europe they're representing, and they're going down into Anatolia and Greece and Israel and the Middle East, and they're having to kind of attack these the Muslim AI basically,
right.
And win these cities for quote unquote fame and glory. And so I created this game. Of course, this is an insane game to try to create. It's insane. Yeah.
Well, I love already that you're trying to wrestle with like moral consequences of things, and like, is it for fame and glory, or is really what we're talking about here vanity, and that we're totally trying to drum up these semi-legitimate reasons in order to force a war that is actually just ending huge amounts of lives here. This is cool, heavy stuff that you're dealing with, man.
Yeah, it was funny that, like, to me, like, looking back, I'm like, this was so normal for me as a history and philosophy person that this is going on in history all the time. And so it presented itself to me a lot like the Lego card game did, I think, back in the day. And so I just started designing it, and I started cutting out poster board just like I did with Lego cards, and I started writing up things. I started researching the Crusades again, even though I had taken classes on it and written papers on it. And I designed for a 4-player area control / card play / drafting. And of course I put too many mechanics in it,
Of course, but everyone's first design is like, let's throw it all in there. It needs everything.
Yeah, I was like, oh, 7 Wonders drafting for which cards you get to play, and then area control, and I used this was probably the one innovation that I felt like I did do. I used dice as your men, and that the power of your men was the number on the die. So the pips on the die were how strong that particular army was.
Totally.
And so that was kind of neat because that was fun math. I mean, it was really a little too much math for a lot of people, but it was fun to me because you go in and you're like, oh, I've got like 1 6, but I've got like 2 4s and a 1. I don't want to lose too many people. But then I put in, just like Archipelago, or even I think UA Rosenberg, he has all those, like, you have to feed your people. Right. I put that element in there too. So you're kind of like, oh, I'll kill off this thing because I don't want to feed you. So there's this like brutality in the player that is kind of how Crusades felt to me when I read about them. Mm-hmm. And so I tried to imbue that kind of sense of brutality in the game. And there was this, we're all on the same team, but if you want to walk through my land, you have to ask me. And I have to agree.
What was the name of this game?
It was called Crusades, a game of conquest and influence, because what other name am I going to give it?
You already have the branding set up for Crusades Junior because you have the Children's Crusades, and that would lend itself to it well, right?
Yeah, that would be awful.
I feel bad for saying that, but
no, that's a great history joke, man. You're in the nerddom now.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so you have this game, which I love that it's inspired by Archipelago, and as I've mentioned on the show before, Archipelago is one of my favorite messy games. That I love that it swings for the fences in so many regards, and sometimes it's a little ham-fisted, and it's got all this kind of weird colonialism type of stuff that's a bit murky, but at the same time, it's one of the very few games that at least attempts to address some of the morality issue of colonialism, and it doesn't tell you how you have to do it. You can totally exploit the people of the land, or you can work collaboratively with the people of the land. And in some regard, you have to utilize both of those. And it's pretty ham-fisted in the sense that you are fundamentally viewing like the happiness and well-being of a local population as just like a metric that is entirely for your economic gain, but it still has elements of like, hey, you work well with this population and they're going to be pleased and work with you and become a more prosperous society. If you exploit them, you get benefit, but it also could end up that they kill everyone, and that's not good for anyone. And that's interesting that's inspiring a certain thought process in gaming for you. And I love that you you went to the feeling of a game. It wasn't just the theme. It wasn't just the mechanics that inspired this game, that it was surrounding like this feeling and this element of semi-cooperative, but also trying to comment on this vain sense of morality. And it's cool that was your introduction to designing kind of this first big project for you. Now, when did you actually try to pitch this game, or did you just scrap it and move on to something else?
Yes. So I playtested that game 12 to 15 times, and I was going to make 4 Crusades a game, and we would get through 1 Crusade in about 2.5 hours. Uh-huh. And so the usual, like, I went at the different problems and realized I was making a game far too big for myself. I couldn't actually handle the level at which this game was operating because I didn't have a lot of the basics, which is, I think, I forgot who it was that was on, I think it was on one of your podcasts that a guy just said, you can't go and just, design, in a sense, the Archipelago or the Robinson Crusoe of gaming and never have made a tiny worker placement game or a set collection game. Like, totally. You need to know that stuff. And so I, once again, like you were saying, Archipelago swings for the fences. I swung for the fences, not knowing I was. And then realized, like, I really loved every bit of it, even though I kind of set it back on the shelf. It's actually still in a box in my house. And I do think it has a game there that I'll return to one day when I feel mature enough to take it on. But I don't know when that day will come. But anyway, I just loved game design as a hobby on the side of what I do in ministry, because it's something that I can ideate about. I can control in some ways. Like, I can actually make something happen and see what happens with it. People, I enjoy being with people, but there's no sense in which I have control over them at all. Like, as silly as that sounds, it's just funny when you're out really hoping and trying to work through the murkiness that is every single one of us. Our desires, our stories are complicated. And they're messy, and that's okay, and that's actually part of humanity, and it's really good. But when you do that all day, and then you come home, I don't want to do another thing that's, like, in some ways I don't even like TV, because it usually is, I don't know, always doing that, or it's super passive and it's just straight entertainment. Mm-hmm. And so I really realized that my mind needed a creative outlet. You can't get real creative with people. He's probably just like, they'd be just weird. So I ended up doing this game design thing, and that's when I realized that I needed kind of a brand for it. I had made Genghis out of index cards, once again, a history time frame. And you know what I realized is I said, oh, everyone thinks of Genghis Khan. They probably think this guy's a brutal conqueror who kills millions of people. And once again, that's true. But the thing they don't realize about Genghis is that he wasn't Genghis one time. And that at one time, he was just a guy in the plains of Mongolia, and he was actually the oppressed one. He was the one that the Jin dynasty and other tribes were, raiding each other and killing his family and a lot of that sort of thing. And he decided, I'm going to unite this place. I'm going to swing for the fences, in a sense. I'm going to do something big.
He's going to design his own archipelago.
Yeah, that's right.
And kill millions of people in the process.
Yeah. I guess that's in the context of history, that's probably about right. But I just thought his story was fascinating because he's one of the most prolific conquerors ever, but he's just a dude from Mongolia. He's not like Alexander the Great. He didn't have some sort of formal training or anything weird like that. So I decided to go towards the origin story because I realized people love origin stories because they usually don't get told. Everyone only knows the end goal. Like, oh, you're an amazing, brutal conqueror that takes over half of Asia or most of it. And so I went after the origin story and started digging around in that and saw a game there that I just immediately was drawn to. And the feeling, again, of I wanted to go for a casual or a casual plus audience because that's who I game with. I don't game with people who play Archipelago very often. I don't game with people who play, Scythe or I don't know, huge, massive, longer games. I play with people like my wife and my more immediate friends, and they play Small World, and they play Dominion, or they play Takinoko, or they play a party game. And so I wanted to make a game for them as the audience, and Genghis really felt like it was still in my alley because I loved history, and I go for the experience and theme first. And so I started designing it off of index cards, and it started to play really well right off the bat. And that was when I realized I might have a real game here, because the first few playtests of Crusades did not go well at all. It was super broken. And so maybe I hit the jackpot or luck or whatever, but I designed Genghis and it went through all the playtests. And about January of this year, I took it to a convention with a like fully processed prototype from GameCrafter and had a bunch of great playtests at an Unpub Mini there. And that was when I realized I need a name. Like, I can't just run around and be like, hi, I'm Jonathan Weaver and I just have this game in a box. You want to play it? I really wanted to make it something that I could produce multiple games for plenty of people to enjoy. And that is where Gameweaver comes from, because I love that games weave people together and that they really can provide opportunities for people to have memorable experiences that then grow relationships, which is what I see happen in ministry a lot, or what I saw happen in the game night that I helped host a lot.
Yeah, totally, dude. And we can't end it there regarding Genghis, because it's not just Genghis. It's Genghis Rising Khan, which is like the coolest title in the world. It sounds like a metal album or something. You know, this is the new band Genghis, and their release is Rising Khan. How freaking cool is that? I was over the moon when I was doing a little bit of research, getting ready for this, and I was like, Genghis Rising Khan. I don't care what that game is. I have to check it out. Mwah! It is a beautiful name that you have on your hands. Worth checking out regardless of whatever publishing name that you have, Gameweaver, or if you're just like, hi, I'm Jonathan Weaver, want to play my game? As soon as you pitch it as Genghis Rising Khan, I'm there. 100%.
That's awesome. I thought the colon Rising Khan was going to be a little bit like, should I do that? I mean, does anyone care? So I'm glad that you like it.
Well, I mean, it has like this cadence to it. One, it feels like an album title, but also Rising Khan kind of reminds me of Rising Dawn. And then you also have the actual literal meaning of it, of, he's the Khan who's rising up into the empire that ends up being what he's in charge of in his life. I mean, it's evocative and it's thematic and it flows really nicely. Like I care about how words run into one another, and that seems like such a stupid thing, but one of my favorite things about writing reviews is when I read it aloud and I go, nah, this doesn't flow right. I need to change this word around, strictly because it doesn't sound coming off the tongue the way that I want it to. And so much of my writing is verbal. I write like I talk, which is probably both a good and bad thing. But Genghis Rising Khan is, it warms my heart. Looking at it on this Google Doc that I have in front of me just makes me smile. So just so we can kind of move on from the Genghis Rising Khan topic, because I will take up the entire rest of the podcast talking about how cool that name is. What is just a quick nutshell of what that game is, and where is it at in production?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, Genghis Rising Khan is predominantly a set collection game where 2 to 4 players use different actions on their turn to gain either resources, they either accrue military, they either raid the other players at the table, or this is one of my favorite parts, is they diplomatically answer multiple choice scenario questions that are set in the Mongolian kind of history.
Oh, you nerd. That's awesome.
I know. It's super nerdy. And they do this to recruit clans from each of the 4 major tribes. Now, historical note, I know that there's not officially only 4 Mongolian tribes, but for the sake of the game, I chose the 4 most major tribes, at least in Genghis's history. And it's kind of a race. You're trying to be the first Khan at the table to recruit one of each of the 4 tribes. And there are 4 of every tribe in the deck. And so the idea of this, like, how do I use my actions to get resources, to accrue military, to make sure I don't either get raided or I want to go raid others. And all the clans are basically telling you what it takes to bribe them into your unification of Mongolia scheme. And so I really liked the race element. It's not about victory points. It's not about calculating at the end, as much as I love some of the games that do that. I wanted there to be this sense of just tension, like, he's ahead. Ooh, that person got the clan that I wanted. And so that's really driven a lot of Genghis Rising Khan for me, in that just that element of being able to relate and interact with the players at the table while feeling tense about kind of what they do. And so that's the pitch for what Genghis Rising Con is about. And it plays in about an hour. It's you only have 2 actions on your turn, so you're not like stressing out a ton, but you do need to make them count. So there's a little bit of that. And the situation with where it's at is it's currently being shopped around to publishers. I feel like I am at the stage where I'm barely tweaking some things. I'm trying some things just for the heck of it. Like I've been trying to design a solo mode just because I know there's lots of solo gamers out there that really enjoy that. And I think I've landed in a zone that I'm going to keep messing with. I was able to put in some variable player powers where you actually get to be one of the cons from history and have like a starting ability. Not starting ability, it's an ability that lasts all game, but it's an ability that only you can do. And I really like that about games. So yeah, so it's in a tweaking, but mostly pitching zone. I feel really good with it.
That's awesome. It sounds great. And I love that it's this kind of deeper, more serious theme in kind of a lighter style game that's more approachable.
I really wanted the story element of those basically you send your envoy to chiefs and those chiefs kind of put you through a test. I wanted that to be the kind of like you get to enter the world of what Genghis would have experienced, but it's still cheesy and kind of funny. Like it's not real, it's not something you would actually experience or anything, but it is kind of like they're like, hey, you can help my woodsmen, or you can help my shepherds, or you can help my me raid a tribe over here. Which one are you going to do, A, B, or C? And you kind of have to weigh out like, oh, what would I do? And I think multiple choice scenarios that are kind of normally choose your own adventure style really just make people feel like they have that control and that sense of like gut feeling, but also like, feel real in some ways. So
yeah, it sounds super cool. And again, that name, I love the name. So you've mentioned ministry a couple times. What is this ministry gig that you have? Are you like a deacon, a prayer leader, a pastor, a chaplain? What are you doing?
Oh man, I actually am so much less prestigious than any of those things. I am a college minister with a ministry called WindShape College Program. And I work at a college called Berry College, which is a small private university over here in Rome, Georgia. It has like 1,500, students. So it's a pretty small college. And I do really, I think the best way I would pitch it is just, I hope to equip college students who follow Christ to be able to follow him for their whole life after college. And kind of there's a ton of things that are entailed in that, but that is the predominant desire of my heart, is that students who would either come to know Christ in college or they already know him before, that they would really feel like they leave with not only tools, but a motivation and desire and a community experience that they had when they were in college to say, I'm going to go out and whatever church I end up at and whatever job I end up at and whatever pathway or journey I take, I know first and foremost that I'm called to live a life that Christ has called me to. And that's kind of what I really desire to see in my ministry with college students.
And what do you do for yourself, like in order to take care of that? Obviously, you're Christian, you're trying to take care of yourself as you're out in the world, and you're integrating into communities that have representation, thankfully has representation of all kinds of different groups and peoples with different religious backgrounds, with different cultural backgrounds, with different genders and opinions on genders. Like where do you sit as you integrate in the world at large, as opposed to something like a Christian private university where you are surrounded by people who share the same faith as you?
Yeah, I think that's just a phenomenal question. I kind of wish more people would ask that of themselves. Just where do I fit in? Where do I interact? And I think that Berry College is not a Christian private college, but it does, it's in the South, which everyone kind of always, calls the Bible Belt, I think rightfully so at times. Mm-hmm. And it does have Christian overtones from their founder. So like it's not Christian in you can't come here, unless you follow these whatever statements and beliefs. But it interacts most with me in the aspect that I know, at least based on my belief system, I know that people are made a certain way. And I think that that's just that deep desire element that I know that people are made for something bigger than themselves, that they really do desire a relationship, not only with people around them, obviously that's pretty clear, we're social creatures, but also with a creator. And so I go at so much of the different people that I run into at Berry College and at any college, and I was an Auburn University grad, so I was at a much bigger college there, with even more denominations or representations. And I just go at it with this idea that this person is made in the image of God, which is clear from Scripture, and that I really want to see them have those deep desires fulfilled, which I do believe by my faith comes from a relationship with that God. It comes with a relationship to that creator. And so that's really my starting spot. It's not hard to treat everybody as if they are made in the image of God when they really are made in the image of God. And so that makes it a lot easier to relate to so many people, because I'm a human too. There's nothing different about me than everybody else on that campus. So yeah, I think that's probably the way I would answer that question.
Yeah. Do you find that your faith interacts with like your creative output, and that you're imbuing aspects of your own worldview and your religious ideals into the things that you create?
Yeah, I think that in some ways, when I think of creativity, I think of the opportunity for beauty. And so beauty is something that is, at least in, like you said, my religious ideals or my perspective on faith, is something that it can be glorifying to the Lord. It doesn't necessarily have to be exactly something that is used in a church service. And I think that's clear in Scripture, from God putting things like beautiful sunsets and sunrises and absolutely gorgeous locations on earth and animals that are absolutely wondrous all around the world. And it's beautiful. And it's beautiful because he made it to glorify him in a way that I just can't even explain. And so that's really what I feel like is so true to me, is that my creativity, I go at that more kind of anthropological front, or the human front of, I want humans to relate and engage together. And that's why I design games that aren't, I'm going to do my thing over here and you can do your thing over there, and we actually don't even have to be in the same room, because why not just do these at home? I want to design games that mean that you get across the table and you have moments and you talk to each other, and maybe even like Genghis have this moment of like, do we agree with this guy? Like, this guy's kind of an interesting, he's an interesting figure in history, right? Like, so it just something that's, like you said earlier, that like the name feels evocative to you. I hope my games are evocative or even provocative in some sense, that they provide opportunity for people to engage over deeper things. And games sometimes are just a fuse, and they're just the first, ignition of, oh, I am experiencing people around a table, and now I'm talking after the game about my life and my work and my family and what I'm doing this weekend or whatever. That can be true of games for sure. But also some games provide an avenue into thinking about bigger things. And right. I think that's really cool too.
Yeah, using them as kind of a platform to start conversations. It makes me think of like, I don't know. I didn't grow up with particularly any religion in my life. If anything, I grew up with a lot of foreign imagery as far as religion goes, a lot of Hindu, a lot of Buddhist stuff, because I spent some of my earliest years overseas, and my dad, who raised me, he didn't go to church or anything. And that, combined with the fact that I was like really into punk rock and heavy metal as a teenager, I have a natural mistrust for anything that's labeled as like a specific type or faith-based work. Take like Christian rock, for example. It feels like an agenda is being served to me by way of music, as opposed to music that's created for just people in general. And sometimes that happens to be created by Christians, but it's no different than anyone else making any sort of music, because they're just imbuing their own experiences and their worldview into their music and having an authentic artistic expression. And that actually sounds like what you're doing here. Like, I don't get the feeling that you're making the Christian rock version of board games, that you're making board games for people. And if there are some I guess personal expressions that are felt throughout that, or even something that just makes someone attracted to you as a designer, then that presents the opportunity for you to have conversations with people. That's what we should be doing as humans, right? We should be having conversations with one another. And it doesn't matter if like I have a different understanding of Christianity than you do, or I'm Buddhist, or, you know, I'm a trans person. Having the conversations and being able to say, well, this is my perspective, and someone else saying this is my perspective, and seeking reconciliation and understanding is really the best thing that we should be doing. And instead, unfortunately, a lot of modern technology and social media has allowed us to isolate ourselves. And that was a big turnoff for me personally about, like, you know, I haven't really talked much about this stuff on the podcast, but like, through my own religious exploration, my wife is a daughter of a pastor, and, you know, trying to reconcile my own upbringing with some of that, and then her reconciling hers with, you know, who I am, being exposed to people who are creating like these ivory towers, addressing only the people who already know what I need to know. I'm not exposing myself to anyone who will allow me to question my own beliefs, because if you can't question your beliefs, then how strong of a believer are you? You know, you have to be able to question it and then make that jump, that faith jump, to say, yes, in spite of all these other things that I am fairly considering, this is the conclusion that I'm coming to. And being able to refine that conclusion, that's so important. And everything that you've told me up until this point, as well as everything that I've read, shows me that you are the best example of wanting people to gather together, have conversations, and be who they are. That's awesome. And something that I applaud you for, and is immediately endeared me to your presence online. Like, you, in a short time, you become a pretty vocal member of the online tabletop gaming community.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate your just thoughts on that. And I do feel, I feel very accepted by the online tabletop community. And I think every single person that probably ever will come on your podcast will say, this is the most open and loving community that there is. And I agree in so many ways when it comes to an industry, specifically an industry community. And so I feel that. And I think that in some ways, I want to go back and say, you said something about you don't make the Christian rock equivalent. I would say that the Crusades game would be the complete opposite of Christian rock, if anything, considering what the Crusades were in history and how awful they were. So I hope that with my very first game, I clearly started off in the I'm a Christian and I play rock zone. But I think the cool part is, like what you just said, the idea that there's just an opportunity for people, all the people. There's no non-humans here that we relate to, you know, in some sense. It's like everyone is a human. Come together and have the real conversations. And what you said about echo chambers, basically, of people who want to stay in the zone where everyone they talk to, everything they talk about is exactly the same as what they believe or think. And I think that is probably, if I would give my totally not professional zone of indictment against really any Christian, it would be that these churches and denominations continue to do that. They continue to close doors. They continue to put up fences. They continue to not exist in the world. And every time in history, being a student of Christian history, obviously, considering I believe what Christians believe, I'm like, every time that happens, the church dies. Every time. It either dies or it becomes really weird and it becomes really bad. And so I just feel like there's an avenue where I don't want to leave the world that I live in because my faith is different than the people that exist around me. I want to engage the people around me with the faith that is different than theirs, because that is where I think the Lord works. And I think, anyway, that's just, I mean, I don't want to go off in just like my faith speech, but that's where I feel like I desire so much to be a part of even something like the board game industry, where I'm going to run into every possible representation of person probably. And that's going to be exciting to me because they're human and I'm human too. And I share a whole lot in common with them all the time. Every day I wake up hungry, tired, ready to, get to the next great thing. I desire love. I desire to have something bigger than myself. There's just so many things that I share with the person who is whatever other representation you want to spill out there. So
yeah, and you know, speaking specifically about like Christianity, you know, the fundamentals should be that, you know, everything, you know, not just a certain set of people, but everything is part of God's plan and God's design and God's creation and God's beauty, you know, that type of thing. And it should go like without saying that new things, like a thing that especially frustrates me is the denial of like new scientific revelations and that kind of stuff. And there's morality and ethics in science. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be those types of things that we need to make discussions about, but you know, there have been times where people have been burned for saying that the sun is the center of our solar system instead of the earth. And it was like, you are a heretic for even saying such a thing. And to me, like talking about how wide the cosmos are, or, you know, how incredibly intricate or even old the universe is, like I'm sure everyone who's gone through some sort of creationist faith system is going to have to reconcile with themselves how the world was actually created. Where it comes to me, I think about like the Big Bang and everything, and I'm like, dude, if that's how it started, that just makes the wonder of the Almighty all that much more exciting. Like every new scientific discovery about a dinosaur, about how old the universe is, how, you know, all these different things happen, trying to reconcile them all together as this gigantic, enormous, intricate clockwork is exciting rather than like scary. And it really gets upsetting with me when someone's like, scientists are evil and they're just telling you all kinds of lies because they hypothesize that we had dinosaurs 65 million years ago. I mean, you can choose to believe what you want, but writing off someone as a heretic because of a new scientific discovery maybe hasn't worked out so well in history. And, you know, maybe just keep an open mind that we're all trying to figure out this thing and come to some reconciliation of our place in the universe.
Yeah, it's funny whenever I see the same thing. Like, obviously, there are things that I grapple with, like you said, of scientific discoveries, and I do think that there should be more discussions about ethics, but it rarely leads to a discussion about ethics whenever those kinds of conversations are going on. It seems more like, here's what I think, and now I've got credibility with the people that think the same as me.
Right.
And I don't understand that. I'm like, if you think the same as me, I shouldn't have to go and make some sort of public Twitter tweet or something to validate my existence in the community that I'm in.
Or try to take you down as the opponent, the other.
Yeah, I think that the thing that I really just I love to tell people, because I'm a history nerd, like I said many times on this episode already, is that though most of the sciences started with Christians, Christians were looking out and saying, hey, the Bible doesn't say exactly blank, but this kind of method showed me this. I wonder how far that can help me. You know, like they weren't like, oh gosh, I wonder if this method will disprove the Bible. Like they were like, oh, I wonder if this method will teach me more about the universe. And most of the time, the Bible isn't trying to tell you about the universe. It's telling you about the creator of the universe.
Right,
so like,
right, exactly.
If it's telling you about the creator of the universe, then you can only imbibe from that so much before you have an entire mysterious zone beyond it. And anyway, that's totally a rant. Like,
yeah, totally. Well, I took you on that rant. We went hand in hand down that rant zone. And I do want to bring it back to some board games. I'm sure there's more than one person out there who was thrilled that we went on that rant. And I'm sure there's several that are like, isn't this a board game podcast? Like at some point, are you actually going to talk about that? Going back to being a participant in this community, you know, as someone who's just on the precipice of starting to get games published and you're pitching to other designers, have there been particular resources that you want to shout out as like, these were things that were so helpful to me, whether it's certain podcasts like Board Game Design Lab, or it's certain communities you mentioned earlier, Jackson Pope's Craft Wednesday thing? You know, what has been really helpful, both as like an informational resource, but also something that's inspired you?
Yeah, man, that's we don't even have a podcast long enough, but I would say My first shout out is probably to local conventions, because I'm in the South and I have 3 children and I don't have a lot of money. Ministry just isn't a super high paying job in the monetary senses, but I love it because of what it does. So I don't get to go to fly to Maryland for the Unpub or go over to PAX Unplugged or something epic like that. But I do get to go to a lot of local cons. And so I would want to shout out the Rocket City Game Fest in Huntsville, Alabama. I mean, they do what they do really well. They have a tiny Unpub Mini, and that's where it all started for me on the bigger scope. Local cons, I'm telling everybody out there, if you're a designer and you're like, gosh, I don't have $4,000 to spend on plane tickets and Unpub tickets, and I would just say find if there's local cons, because there probably is, because there's people passionate about gaming everywhere. And so go to those, get some awesome playtests in and playtest other designers' games. And I think start your own design group in the area on meetup.com or Facebook. Those have been awesome for me.
Shout out to Platypus Con here in Juneau, Alaska.
There you go. Platypus Con. Yeah. It's like, I mean, I shouldn't say no one. Very few people are probably flying in for Platypus Con, but those people are passionate about what they do. And if you can go be a part of that, you can just really build so much of a community in the area that you're placed in, the area that you work in and live in.
Tell you what, when you're making your like board game design millions and I'm making my podcast millions, I will fly you in as like guest of honor to Platypus Con.
Dude, the name Platypus Con makes me want to go so bad. It's called Platypus Con, which is an amazing name for a convention to me. That is like the way that you were geeking out over Genghis Rising Con. I'm like, dude, a Platypus Con? That sounds incredible. I want the pin. I want the shirt. Anyway, platypuses are just epic. And so I would say that. I would say exactly what you're saying. Local cons. I would also say Board Game Design Lab has been a huge resource. Game Designers of North Carolina, they have some of the most technical podcasts out there that deal with the design problems that you're probably facing if you're a designer. And that has been huge for me. I usually actually listen to one of 3, here's you guys getting a glimpse into my life, but one of 3 podcasts when I mow the lawn, because it's one of the few times where I get to listen to something I want to listen to and not watch, the TV shows that my children watch, and or talk to them about whatever they're interested in, which I love doing. But that hour and a half that it takes me to mow the lawn, I get to listen to either the Cardboard Herald, I get to listen to Board Game Design Lab, or I get to listen to Game Designers in North Carolina. And I love all 3 of those podcasts, and they've been a huge bonus to me, at least on the audio front. And then I would say Proto ATL was where I got to meet Josh and Alex and Shane of Gray Fox Games. I got to brush shoulders with Rick from Flying Lemurs. I got to see a ton of people from the industry at Proto ATL in May. And that was super fun, and probably the most exciting experience I got. Once again, a local con, but using that Proto Spiel brand. And then Cardboard Edison is just a default. Like every single designer, if you don't have Cardboard Edison, if you're not a Patreon of Cardboard Edison, or if you're not following them, you're missing out immensely on some amazing resources that will really speed up your game design.
Yeah, it's a fantastic community that they've fostered there too. Like that's such a cool thing. I've talked about it a million times, but the community of people trying to make games, even though it is a competitive community in the sense that there's only so many games that are going to get published, but there are so many people who are willing to help one another out, to help make videos, to help refine games, to play test games, to just be someone to uplift one another and give really actionable, concrete advice. Like seeing the Unpub room, seeing designers interact online, like it seems like an even playing field, not like a tiered thing where, you have like these rock stars of the industry and then the lowly garage band level type of people. Like it seems like everyone just wants cool games to be out there, and it's such a intimate and tight-knit community. It's really some of the most uplifting energy that I've ever seen, is just being a part of this in the small way that I am, and to witness people pitching games, to witness people critiquing each other's games. It's so awesome. Yeah.
Also, I totally agree with everything you just said, and I don't want to forget one other person. Well, 2 other, Chris Rollins and Matt Christensen of 1000 XP. they did a YouTube series called Board Game Design Time that probably helped me actually make a game that works.
That's awesome.
Genghis is from them. I remember watching those YouTube videos and being like, "Oh, that's why Crusade sucks. Oh, that's another. Crusade sucks. Oh, that's another reason." I was like, I have to use these things and make a new game. And
Every one of these videos is just a harsh reminder of why my game sucks.
Yeah, it was great though because it helped me make a game that's I'm pitching it to publishers about a year later. So like, they just did a great job breaking it down for, in a sense, the layman. Like I was a total noob, and I still am. But I was a total noob. I had made some big, massive bunch of cardboard that sort of worked together, and they helped me make a game. So big shout out.
So you're at the point where you're pitching the games to different publishers, that kind of stuff. Have you had to deal with much rejection at this point?
I have only had people say, that's not the game for me. I had at Proto-ATL 3 meetups, one with Renegade, one with Flying Lemurs, and one with Gray Fox. And it was just really cool to hear from publishers like, hey, here's why this game doesn't work for us. And that's really usually what I've been getting. I haven't had anyone be like, this is a rubbish game. Which maybe they're just being nice, which is I appreciate. And that's totally good of them for sure. But I think that it's been neat to be in the industry and just be sending, another update. And I've got a few other publishers that are looking at some of my other games and they're still looking at them and they haven't said like, no, thanks, I don't want this, or man, you need to fix these 12 things about this before I even look at it again.
Well, it sounds like if they're giving you little bits of advice here and there, that wouldn't even be worth their time if there weren't some core worth commenting on there.
Yeah, and I think that has been cool to me because, you make this thing and you kind of hold it with like, oh, this is my baby. But then you're like, oh, but it's probably not, and you look at Jamie Stegmaier or you look at Matt Leacock or you look at these guys who just develop incredible games and you're like, oh, my game, don't even look at it, And so it's been cool to hear people kind of validate a little bit of that. Just, oh, man, I did design something and it is worth people's looks. And Gray Fox was pretty they enjoyed playing the game with me at Proto-ATL, and I think that was where I was like, a publisher enjoyed playing the game, like why would they enjoy playing a game that I made, and so that was neat to me. I just thought that was really cool.
You sound like the first time someone emailed me asking if they could come on the podcast, and I'm sure it was for some like Kickstarter circuit or something, they were just looking for publicity, but I was like, someone wants to come on this thing? I don't have to like strong arm someone? What's going on here? I don't know how to deal with this information.
Yes, that is exactly right. That moment when you get someone asking for what you do, you're like, what? Yeah. So if you haven't had to deal with too much of a cold shoulder and it's all been sunshine and rainbows as far as the pitches go, what has been kind of the biggest struggle in breaking into this industry, whether it's something that's really personal to your situation or maybe it's something more universal that you'd want others to know as they're trying to do the same thing? Yeah, no. So I'll give the few things that I feel like are a struggle, and then some of the ways that I feel like I've tried to adapt at best as possible. Probably the one biggest struggle is I am a minister, and I have 3 kids and a wife, and I love them dearly, and I want to be very present. They are 5 months, 2.5, and 4. So like they're in that stage where we're just surviving some days. So
I can't imagine that. I have a 3.5-year-old, and every day I'm like, what would it be like to have 2 or even 3 of these? This would be impossible.
I agree. My biggest shout out of this entire podcast goes to my wife for sure. She's a champ and literally is just an incredible mom. So, but I think the thing that causes in my life is I watch on Twitter or I watch on Facebook or other things. These designers that I got to know through these cons and stuff get to go to all these amazing places, Origins and Gen Con, and they get to go to Unpub every year, or Protospiel Madison or San Jose or whatever. And I don't really have the margin for that. I don't have the margin to really get out there and make the awesome networking connections that they get to make and make the friends that you get to make in the industry.
Right.
And so that has been a hard thing for me in this, like, is it even feasible to be a game designer and go to 2 conventions a year, one a local convention that I love to death, but it's just an Unpub mini where probably no publishers are, and one shot at getting in front of publishers at like a Proto-ATL. And I think that obviously it is, but I think there's an element that just says, man, I'm behind all the time. I just feel like I'm not making it. And I think that has been something that I have to grapple with. It's this desire, almost overinflated desire for success, but I don't know. I haven't done a good job in my heart and my mind sometimes just defining success.
Right.
Success is a comparison game if you let it just sit out there with no definition.
Totally.
And of course,
yeah.
You'll compare to somebody who's, if you're in music, you'll compare to the Bruce Springsteens, the Beatles. You'll compare to somebody who's just the greatest. And in game design, even if you're not going to be as foolish to compare yourself to like Jamie Stegmaier because he looks like 500 leagues above you, you would compare yourself to one other designer who started a year ago that also has 3 signed games.
I totally know that in the podcasting world and the YouTube world and everything, if you start making those comparisons, it can drive you nuts and it can be so demoralizing. And all these things that you're saying are huge things that I've been grappling with in the last, several months, and have recently kind of come to like, what am I trying to achieve out of this? What does success mean to me? And what do I want this thing to be like that's sustainable in a way that I feel adds value to this community and is a good creative outlet, but is also not killing me as I strive to be something that is unreasonable to even expect that I could ever achieve it.
Yeah. And it's true that success, a lot of times, if you don't like take those moments to reflect like you do, and that I'm trying to do, is that it'll drive you away from the things that you really wished you were successful at, like a family or
Totally.
a job. And so I think that's been the thing that I have grappled with the most more recently as con season's gone by, and I've watched all the amazing pictures and tried to revel in other people's successes and exciting opportunities, is that I've found myself fighting discontentment with where I am, and then having to recalibrate to like, wait, you 1 year ago had some index cards and didn't know what game design was. Don't get so far ahead of where you are to think that you have to make some sort of benchmark that other people are making. Like that's not my journey, that's theirs. And so just really trying to center myself on I'm a father of 3 kids. They're way more important. My wife is way more important. My job is way more important. And this game design thing is an awesome creative outlet, which is what you said. And I really enjoy it, and it's something that keeps me going. And I'll design games whether publishers say no forever, because there's something that I love about it.
And you've been doing it since those Beanie Babies.
Yeah, I've been doing it since babies. Oh man.
Well, everything that I can tell from this entire podcast is that your charm, your likability, your thoughtfulness, your self-reflection, those are going to be endearing qualities that whether you're going to 2 conventions a year, you're going to 10 conventions a year, whether you're on one podcast or on 100 of them, that's going to attract people to you, and they're going to root for you, and they'll want you to make good games. So as long as you have those good games to deliver, I think it's going to work out all right for you. So how about we just end this with like one really uplifting thing, like what is a recent success or a milestone or something with Gameweaver that you are just really elated or super proud of?
Man, that's an easy one, just because I'm sending literally an update about it to the people that love and that inspire me. I made an 18-card game almost a little less than a year ago, because the Game Crafter had a contest, and I was like, I'm not going to enter the contest, but I'm really tired of working on Genghis right now. And so I just decided one afternoon to put together a tiny 18-card game and see what happened with it. And then a year or a little less than a year later, Gen Cant 2018 comes by, and it's an 18-card contest. And I had been dabbling in it on my free time whenever I wasn't putting hours and hours into Genghis. And so it had turned out okay. It had turned out pretty great. And so I decided to enter it into the contest, which of course means that I, start playtesting it even more and tweak it even more. And that was just super fun to see that I can design board games in a random Saturday afternoon just because I want to, because it's fun. and it become a game that it's a game that's super involved. So I've watched people around the table just smile the biggest smiles and laugh and be like, you did this to me. And there's this enjoyment around a game that for me was just a creative outlet on a Saturday. And so that has been super cool. And now it's before publishers, and some publishers are looking at it because it's a micro game, and that's becoming a big thing these days. And so just a neat bit of providence in a sense, that just like something that I love to do also helps other people enjoy encounters with one another. And it wasn't even for success or fame, or I wasn't thinking, how do I make sure that this can get pitched to a publisher one day? It was just for fun. And so I think that was been one of the coolest uplifting stories, is that Aces and Places is the name of the game. You're a bunch of aviator pilots trying to win, stay in the sky as long as possible, as well as get the most hits and ace points from different maneuvers. And so anyway, it's just a super fun, light micro game that has been so much fun to watch just evolve over time and cause a ton of enthusiasm and energetic responses from people. So
that's awesome. I'm so happy for you, man. All right. Well, thank you, Jonathan, for coming on the show. Where can people find more about Gameweaver Games?
Absolutely. So I am still in the moment of trying to get all my technology up and rolling, but I'm definitely on Twitter the most at J_Weaves, Weaves. I am also on Facebook with a Facebook group called Gameweaver. There's no space there, GAMEWEAVER, and you'll be able to find that. Love you to be a part of that. That's where I post the most updates from my end. And then from that Facebook group, you can find a email newsletter sign up, Gameweaver updates, through a MailChimp landing page that's on that Facebook group. So that's probably the predominant way. I'm also at Gameweaver or GWeaverGames at gmail.com. So there's a lot of G's in there. GWeaver
G's everywhere. If you need the weaves, you just find the letter G. You'll figure it out.
That's right. So GWeaverGames at gmail.com. Wow, I can't even say it anymore. Anyway, that's where I'm at email. I'm pretty active on email as well as Twitter, and I'd love to hear from any of y'all. So.
Yeah, well, I'll make sure to have all that in links in the comment section or the show description, the show notes, and then I'll make sure that everyone gets a look at Genghis Rising Con, as well as hopefully I'll have a link to something showing off some aces and places. Was that it?
That's right, yeah.
All right, man. Well, thank you, Jonathan, for coming on the show. Thank you, everyone in the audience, for listening. This has been Jack and the Cardboard Herald. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, man. Glad to be here.
Thank you for listening to the Cardboard Herald. As always, everything we do is ad-free and audience-supported. If you'd like to help keep it that way, find the Patreon link at the top of our webpage, cardboardherald.com. We have several levels of support with various rewards. If you enjoyed the show, we do a whole bunch of other stuff, including reviews, interviews, and recommendations across writing, podcasts, and video. You can find that on our YouTube channel or by visiting any of our social media or our website. So with that out of the way, thank you again for listening to the Cardboard Herald.